Choosing to terminate a pregnancy because the child would be handicapped is reasonable. Firstly, I want to mention that I have worked with both physically and mentally handicapped people, and among them were the most lovable, loving, and truly inspiring people I've met in my life, albeit I don't think it's fair for parents to be required to sacrifice their chance of a normal life for their child. To those who do, whether by choice or not, give birth to handicapped children, you have my deepest respect, and I don't doubt that parents will do anything in their power to provide the best life for their children and love them the way they are, but I don't think it's wrong to assume that such a life is more emotionally taxing than raising healthy children. As previously mentioned, these people often exhibit a love for life most of us couldn't compare to. Still, I don't think you should be required to give up your own life and sanity for someone else because of society's morals. Honestly, I wouldn't be strong enough to handle such a situation. Also, how can you 100% trust anyone else to look after your kid after you die? I knew a family that had a genetic disorder that was passed on to their first kid. Said kid was severely disabled and died before his 20s. Knowing fully well that any future offspring would have the same disorder, they went against the advice of literally everyone they knew and had another kid. Suffice to say, parents and the new kid aren't doing so well. I agree. I don't want to sound like a horrible person, but the responsibility of a handicapped child is a lot. I don't think I could handle a kid in general. Also think that these parents will not always outlive their child. In fact, normally parents don't outlive their child. So what happens when these parents die? The handicapped is now dependent on their siblings who didn't make this choice, or caregivers who usually don't love them and can't in the same way a parent can. I am by no means saying they shouldn't have been born, but these are things to think on when making this choice. I would rather see a pregnancy terminated than a child raised resented and unwanted. Also, no one should be required by society to be saddled with a severely disabled child unless they choose to take on that burden. My guess most feel pressured by the church they attend, which to me is totally ridiculous. I hear the argument that would you rather have been aborted than had the chance to live whenever I argue in favor of this, and I'd just like to say, as someone who has a long lineage of heart conditions, with everyone dating back to WW2 having died from heart complications on my dad's side, I won't have children because it's cruel to force someone to live knowing that, with my first close call being at 16 and still repeatedly having more than concerning chest pains from my heart region which are medically unexplainable, the child could well be living in pain from a young age, and while they may be as old as 50 when they become symptomatic, or they may be some miracle not be symptomatic at all, it would only be cruel to force someone to suffer so much when I could just adopt a child and spare a life of potential suffering. It's frankly inhumane the attitude people have where they can have major genetic conditions and still insist upon having biological children, and it's also Orwellian to force kids to live in constant pain and suffering because every life's worth living. If you have a genetic history of health complications, then it should be perfectly acceptable to get an abortion, and anyone who argues about it being unethical clearly needs a lesson in ethics themselves. Bring back the Spartan baby cliff. I agree, you only have one life, you live it by all means. To have a mentally ill kid is to give up your whole life to that kid, even in old age when you can't no longer take care of yourself. It's entirely reasonable. I've worked with special needs teenagers, and the parents all looked like the life had been drained out of them. They loved their kids, but they had that 1,000-yard PTSD stare. I'm so terrified that I'll have a disabled child when I do have kids. Maybe if I didn't already have a severely disabled older brother already, I'd have a different opinion, but I absolutely do not want to have to deal with the mental strain of having a disabled child. I'm the only one who currently helps my mom with my brother. Dad does absolutely nothing. It's just exhausting, constantly worrying, and having to feed, bathe, and change him. I've already dealt with it for 18 years, and I'm sure I'm gonna have to deal with it till I move out. I don't think I want to deal with it for the rest of my life. Not to mention that there are people who just aren't qualified to raise a handicapped person, or any kid really. There are friends of friends on my Facebook feed who legit call their own children INV **lids while posting for validation about how hard their lives are. I guess I kinda have a weird outlook on it. The people alive today with severe disabilities didn't choose to be born that way, they didn't choose to be met with a combination of pity and revulsion upon first meetings, they didn't choose to be excluded from normal activities, they didn't choose to be different. If a couple or the mother knows that their kid is gonna be born with a severe disability and then chooses to have the kid anyway, they are forcing that life upon their child. If a couple or mother knows that their kid is gonna be born with a severe disability and chooses to abort, then they are not saying that those alive with that disability are somehow lesser than, or that those alive with that disability should be killed. Those parents are simply saying this isn't the life we want for ourselves and or our child. It's a personal choice, not a goddamned freak show. As a side note, I think it would be better phrased those who choose to raise a handicapped child. My mum works with the foster care system, so I often hear about kids with disabilities being raised by someone other than their birth parents, for varying reasons. I'm not too familiar with biology, but how do they test/know what handicaps a baby will have before it's born? Serious question, not trying to be funny or weird. Is it as simple as a blood test taken from the growing fetus? Since age 8 I've been collapsing lungs left and right. I believe I'm at 44 confirmed pneumothoraxes, 14 chest tubes, 5 drains and 2 emergency surgeries, 1 to 2 hands worth removed from each lung. Slightly forced to live with tiny breaths, any larger and I'll start coughing to the pain from scar tissue, coughing equals more collapses. Early puberty, I just said no to sex. I would have potential of torturing any male offspring within 2 generations and of me with slight chance of female. Use protection or sterilize yourself. Yeah, that's the easy way out, Imo. ID say reasonable. Terminal virgin age 28 says good decision. Not purposefully torturing kids is a good idea. The US doesn't provide adequate resources for parents who bear handicapped children, especially those who are poor. They want us to poop out a child and then just fucking abandon us. They're puritanical sociopaths, preaching about the sanctity of life and then asking us to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps.